Hi, and welcome to heaven. This is Julia Kibilda,
En Raquel Welsh.
and today on this sunny Saturday morning, we're coming to you with another episode. I'm sick, so just a disclaimer, if anyone hears me coughing my lungs out or try to cut it out, but I apologize. How are you, Raquel?
I'm good. I am still feeling summer in, even though online everyone is all about autumn, getting cozy with autumn outfits, autumn everything. And I'm just like, it's 30 degrees. I'm still going to the beach. I'm so out of this season.
It's 7 degrees in London, at least it was in the morning, and my heating is on. I'm under a blanket. I'm so excited to wear all of my sweaters. Today I'm going on a walk, get some hot chocolate, and just walk around the park. And honestly, I couldn't be more excited. I'm honestly kind of glad that summer is over because summer in London, as anyone who lives in London knows, is hellscape. So actually, sunny autumn is much better. Besides the fact that I obviously got super sick because of the temperature drop. But anyways, coming to the topic of our episode today, we are gonna talk about the rodent
Ratman.
man. Exactly. The rat man, the rodent man, and all the other men's actually that exist in our manosphere.
We just like saw, I mean, everybody was in a way like with the rise of hot rodent men in this past summer. And we just kind of want to talk about it. And while thinking about this episode, we just realized there's so many different types of men now. We have the rat men, we have golden retriever boyfriends, we have baby girls and short kings, and we just wanted to analyze it a bit on how this came about. Why are we calling men rats and dogs, and what does this mean about the female gaze?
The whole zoo. Let's go. Yeah, it's actually quite an interesting phenomenon that we kind of, I feel like we as a society in general, we feel the need to categorize. So we tend to like put people into boxes and kind of define certain characteristics and certain, whether it's like appearance or character, and shuffle them in like different categories. And I feel like prior to social media, this was, more social class, etc. And some maybe it was influenced by film and whatnot, some like archetypes. Whereas now it's very much like online trends. And I think that's where it all transpires. So I feel like it's so much more exacerbated because those online trends come so quickly and they spread so quickly. And then they go equally as quickly. Like I don't even hear people talking about rodent men anymore, to be honest.
Yeah, although like all these terms come and go, I think they kind of stay in essence of like, as you're
Mm.
saying, of categorizing, keep on categorizing people. And a lot of times now when we go like fully on analyze it, there are a lot of similarities between all of them and like patterns of what women find attractive in men. They just keep getting new names or new references, but they end up all being the same characteristics or the same pattern of what we find attractive. And I think it's quite interesting to look over it, all these terms. And we have a necessity, as you say, of having these terms. So even though they are new and people can like, oh, the golden boyfriend is out, go find yourself a hot rat man. But like the essence is actually always still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we should start talking about each one of them and then go from there.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like the Ratman is particularly interesting in a sense that the Ratman is basically someone who's not conventionally attractive. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like women rebranding unattractive men into being like super hot. So yeah, I feel like to help everyone visualize, we have Jeremy Allen White, who's famous for the bear and his Calvin Klein campaigns, or like the guy from Challengers, what's his name? The
Uh,
ginger guy.
that's Mike Feist
Oh
and
yeah.
Josh Connor. They're both two types of rats.
Yeah, they're both like different rats. I love the comparisons on the internet to that like
I know.
cartoon because they look exactly the same. Oh, that's very funny.
We have Barry Koeghan from
Yeah,
Saltburn, like an older reference, and that's how we kind of see how these keep coming back is like Adam Driver, which people were also
that's
so over
true.
him.
Adam
And
Driver is such a rat man. I don't find Adam Driver hot at all. Like, okay, he has a good physique because he was in the Navy or whatever, Marines, but no.
but that's kind of what it's about.
Respectfully, no.
But that's the same thing with Jeremy Allen White, because I don't want to be rude, but as you say, they're kind of ugly, and that's kind of what makes them hot. That's kind of what I read on these definitions of these men. They're a bit weird, kind of quirky, kind of funny, kind of shy.
Like an introvert. They're not like other boys, basically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's like that eccentricity that makes him kind of hot. It's like, oh, he's not that typical hot, and that's hot.
Yeah, I feel like women kind of like something different. So if he's not the same, it's not like he's not conventionally pretty. So that's like something more interesting about him. So that makes him like more hot and like more appealing. And it's like allure of the unknown. Like, oh, like what? Why is he like that? Like, why is he so mysterious? Like, why is he so different?
Yeah, yeah. Usually would have like a bit of a banter with you as well, you know?
Exactly. He has some personality because he wasn't always pretty. So, he had to develop a sense of humor in his youth.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, literally.
so it's kind of that. And it's quite funny because I feel like it's very interesting how women like female gays, how that looks. I feel like we're so much more focused about personality, and most of these trends are more focused on that and behavior, and the physique is kind of the secondary backdrop for it. Whereas for men, it's like completely the other way around. I mean, you have a stereotype of a beautiful woman that's been fluctuating for years, but it's essentially been like the same thing over and over and over and over again. And it's kind of just one image of a woman.
Yeah. And
Whereas,
usually when you ask, for example, an average guy and ask, oh, what's your ideal woman? They will list physical attributes. But if you when you ask like the average woman, what's your ideal man? They will first list most personality traits.
yeah, for sure.
So there is definitely a focus on personality first, and the physique kind of fuels on the personality instead of the other way around, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah, that's true. And I feel like with the rodent men, it feels like women are so it almost feels like women are so short for choices because men are in generally so horrible, especially the attractive ones, because how they have overinflated confidence that we've kind of made ourselves believe that the unattractive men are hot because we are hoping that they have some sort of personality and they're gonna be nicer than the regular ones.
Yeah, literally out of like my first impressions with this kind of trend was that it does feel like a form of self-gaslighting. Like,
Is he kind of hot or is he just on the train with me? Like, is he kind of hot or is he my coworker?
yeah, that's literally it. It's a desperate act of finding certain men attractive because so many others are shit. So I was like, well, if I have to go for this, let me find it cool. Let me like make it cool for myself.
Honestly, people they say there's plenty of fish in the sea, but oh man, like the fish are dead. The fish are floating like with their bellies outwards. The fish are harassing, and the fish are not great.
Sure.
The fish are not fresh, and we know
Fish on a fish.
bad fish equals sickness. So that is my metaphor. The fish are
We
bad.
keep on the zoo animal theme.
They're expired. The fish are expired, and you do not eat bad fish. That's unhealthy for you.
Other two men categories that I find very interesting is definitely the baby girls, which kind
I
of appeared a bit earlier this year, not necessarily in summer. So
I'll be
just to give you
honest,
some examples,
I don't know what that is.
you will know as soon as I quote these three examples. Jacob Elordi,
Oh yeah, okay. I see what you.
Paul Mescal,
Oh,
and Pedro Pascal.
Mario Pascal, beauty.
So,
Yeah, they're
and
beauty.
yeah, see, there you go. So
I see what
they're
you.
like these cuties, and they're also very much associated sometimes with their roles. I mean, of course, their personalities and how they portray themselves in media, but also with their roles. So Jacob Elordi, mostly with his role in Saltburn, Paul Mescal with his role in Normal People, the film After Sun, and Pedro Pascal in The Last of Us. So this is like a term that is applied to attractive men that give more of a vulnerability, cutesy energy. So it's like actually a very endearing term. It means someone who is vulnerable and non-threatening, which is I think is quite key here.
Yeah,
That
non-threatening
be
voice.
desirable.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's like non-threatening voice. And also that these men, when they are confronted publicly about this term, they actually do not get offended by it. They even
Yeah,
embrace it.
yeah,
And
yeah. They embrace like their more feminine side.
Yeah, so they're like very comfortable in their masculinity, but also with their femininity and don't mind have that being the bigger side of them than their masculinity. So it's really using the feminine as a highlight or as a positive term that it was first coined by women, but that these men in Pacific fully embraced it and never got offended by it, which just makes them even more desirable. So there's like this whole cycle thing of the baby girls, which are these grown men.
That's kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, yeah, I think that's again, it's like women trying to show men that like this is what we like. We like when you're cute, and then we like when you express your emotions, and we like when you're not trying to be an alpha male, and when you're like sweet and nice and just being a cutie. I mean, let's ignore the fact that apparently Paul Mescal like runs away from his dates, but anyway.
Anyway, we're talking just about the superficial here.
Exactly. But yeah, but yeah, I think another thing then it's also important to say that like obviously speaking of that, these trends are based on very much our superficial perception of someone who's most often like a public figure. So
Yeah,
in reality, we have no clue how they are as people. We have no way of knowing. We don't know them personally. So it's kind of
yeah,
like we like kind of projecting like our ideal characteristics of them into those people because they seem to portray them through like either their public appearance or their roles, as you said, whatever it is. Same
yeah,
with,
yeah.
like, soft boys like Timothy Chalamet. He used to be, the biggest soft boy, artsy
Mhm.
boy archetype in pop culture in like the recent years, and that's why there was such a big outrage when he started dating Kylie Jenner because people
Yeah,
thought
yeah.
it was two completely different worlds colliding, but actually it's not. Like they're both celebrities. He just plays those type of roles, but it doesn't mean he's like that in real life. He may be way closer to Kylie Jenner than we could ever think of. His characters are not like that, but it doesn't mean that he is. But I think it just kind of shows how these trends are super very superficial and kind of, even though they're like based on characteristics more than looks, they are very much so arbitrary and kind of fabricated by the public, let's say.
A very great example, and I actually feel that category that came with Timothy Chalamet of the soy boy was really popping off last year, and it kind of prelude all these other terms that
Yeah.
came over this year, for example. So that yeah, that's a great example, and how it is so fueled by fiction as well, which women do love,
We
of like
love
and
fiction.
stuff. Another that I would see it kind of similar to baby girls is the golden retriever boyfriends, which is more, it's not so much connected to real people like celebrities, although there's some examples. It's more like a trend on TikTok, and I think it also comes from romance novels. So a lot of content creators would just like do that to their own boyfriends of like, oh, my golden retriever boyfriend being lost, and then when he found me, and it's just like this video of a very lost boy, and then he sees me and he's like just like a dog.
Yeah.
And like they're mostly extremely handsome, but cluelessly naive, like borderlining a male bimbo archetype. And I saw
Male bimbo.
it's such like an erotica thing because I saw this quote from an article of saying sometimes the heart simply wants the unconditional devotion of a man who may or may not be able to read. And I was like, oh my God.
Honestly, yeah, whenever I think of like the golden retriever boyfriend, it like just kind of feels like a slightly dumb guy, who's just
It
like,
is.
his big eyes, just looking at his girlfriend, waiting for her to mommy him, That's kind of like the
Yeah.
vibe I'm getting.
I think the key of golden retriever boyfriend is definitely the loyalty and devotion that he has to his girlfriend. Like you are the center of his world, and obviously it is a fantasy that perhaps a lot of women have because they are never the center of their relationships, or like they're never put first in their relationships, which can also bring a bit of sadness into this very fun trend. But I really think it comes from that, and also again like a completely non-threatening boy like. And then there's yet another category that I just wanted to briefly mention, which is of the short king, which is also a very interesting one because it's very similar to the rodent man because it puts at the forefront a typically not conventional attractive that it has to do with height. And a lot of men do talk about women wanting always
Thomas.
tall men. And this is all about bringing confidence to men who are short, which I actually think is one of the nicest ones because
Yeah,
most of the guys who are called short kings also really embrace it and it gives them a lot of confidence. And they
yeah, for
usually
sure.
And they're usually connected with their more comedic aspect, the fact that they have a lot of charisma. Again, obviously to compensate the fact they are not attractive conventionally to women. But I actually see it a lot as men's like self-love kind of movement, which is actually super nice to see. And I think they really embrace this. And the fact that it originally came from women calling them that, and then they started, calling them that
Yeah.
themselves. I think it just, it kind of shows a little bit how women are, in a way more supportive.
Yeah, and like way more
Other.
open and empathetic as well. Like it kind of shows we don't really care as long as you're nice to us and you have character. It's not really the looks are kind of not like the prerequisite to like you being successful in dating or whatnot, you know? It's kind of like secondary. Obviously I'm not gonna say looks don't matter because they do and everyone knows that. But I feel for women it's so much more a full package kind of thing than just looks because men would literally just date anything that moves and is pretty. So
Yeah, they will overlook certain personality traits that perhaps they don't like that much because, oh, well, she's hot, so like that's good for me. While women will maybe question it a bit more. Although we are also guilty of like ignoring red flags because, well, he had a six pack, what can I say?
yeah, that's true. But speaking of the attractiveness, there's another trend that I want to talk about, which apparently is on my side of Instagram because you told me you haven't seen it.
Mhm.
But it's like the hot sexual chef men. I don't know how to describe, but basically it's we all know women like a man who cooks. We all know we like to have our own dinner made. But I feel like, especially in the pandemic, when people started going into their hobbies, this trend, this idea of cooking on social media really popped off. And with that came the hot men harassing the food. Okay.
I can't.
With them, one specifically, his name is Cedric, I believe, and he's this like, super ripped guy who just, either cooks with his shirt off or a very tight fitting black shirt or tank top. So, you can see, you can like make sure you can see his muscles. And then obviously he's a professional chef, so he cooks really, really gourmet food. But the way it's filmed is he's always fingering the liquids and, caressing the fruits or whatnot. And like, yeah, food is sensual, but this is a bit much, like it's a bit too
Sure.
much. And I feel like this also got really emphasized with the show The Bear when it first came
Mhm.
out, which also kind of focuses on cooking again, like linking to Jeremy Allen White, who's our rodent man. But again, this idea of a man who cooks being really hot and appealing and this allure of life in the kitchen and whatnot. But I just see so many of those on Instagram, and I just want to see a recipe, like I'm at a point where I just want to see a good meal being made. Like, I don't need you to wink at me. I don't need you to harass the food. I have my boyfriend to do that. Like, I have my boyfriend to wink at me when he cooks, Like, I don't need these random men on the internet to do that because honestly, I feel embarrassed watching the videos. Like, I'm just trying to see what you're making to the risotto, and then there he is being like, "Yeah, wink, wink, baby.
Oh my
Here's
God. For
some
me, it's the
batter."
fingering.
Yeah,
For
no,
me, it's the
here is
fingering, like really gets me. Did I just turn on porn and without noticing, or am I still on Instagram?
this guy Cedric, he's particularly bad, but there's also this other guy. I don't follow him because he's too much, but there's this other guy that I follow who's Polish, and it's quite interesting because his whole persona is also kind of like this hot chef. He's not. He's more leaning into the romantic marketing type rather than the sexual. So he's kind of like Gabrielle and Emily in Paris. He's kind of this really stereotypically attractive man cooking really good food for a woman, always serving it to you. And it's very funny because obviously he has such a big following on Instagram and women obsess over him. But what's interesting is that behind his marketing and the person who films all of his videos and is his marketing manager is his girlfriend. So it's
Wow.
clearly an account for a female girls because she knows what's gonna sell because she's his girlfriend, so she knows what's attractive. And it's very funny to see all the people in the comments being like, "Oh my God, you're so hot, you're so attractive, wink at me." And he ends all his videos with like a wink. And
That's very interesting. Yeah.
it's very funny knowing that like the person behind it is actually a girl who basically knows what's gonna sell and is kind of using it as a marketing strategy, which I think is very
She
interesting.
is kind of objectifying her boyfriend for profit, and I never thought I would live to the day where that shift would happen. And
I
I'm
know, right?
glad.
And she almost never appears in the videos and whatnot. So it's she's really like the person behind the scenes pulling all the strings, you know?
When you were describing, like, I was kind of thinking it's kind of interesting because, yeah, we're just being keep turning out this word, but the female gaze is really starting to come off and reign in the pop media discourse. And when we discuss these like archetypes of boys and men that are all categorized, but firstly by women and are kind of dictating what is considered to be attractive or not. But when you're like describing the way these videos of the men like fingering things and stuff, I feel like it's also a very good expression on on women's sexuality, because I feel the men's sexuality is way more brutal and upfront, like tits on a screen. And for women, I think because our sexuality has always been a bit more repressed, the way we always found to express it is in more subliminal terms. So like you're not actually doing nothing. You're just putting two fingers inside of dough, but that subliminary kind of comes through, and that's kind of how you feel. And I felt that as like, discovering my own sexuality, that I prefer more not like
Like
straight.
indirect, yeah.
Yeah, it's like more about feeling or touch or, sensation over like how's a nice word for it? Like it's like sensation over
Yeah,
like
like
like a
direct like
visual thing.
stimulation. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
Yeah, that I think is really showing how like, our sexuality is different and how it is stimulated in different ways that have to do with, much more with the like sensory elements. And I find it quite interesting how we're seeing it more and how it's like being sparked on like in all these like little different things, but coming all together. Are we actually experiencing a shift in gaze, a shift in like a more feminized world even?
yeah, that's true. That's true. We're coming for you and we're gonna push our gaze.
Yeah.
Finally, let it be seen.
Yeah, and I also think that this more, experiencing another side and experiencing another perspective is also giving an opportunity to men to also be different in a sense that all these archetypes and stuff, they're all a bit of an antithesis to toxic masculinity, which has been talked over for
Mm,
a few years already. And I think they actually offer a more nuanced view of what masculine is or could be to a
yeah.
lot of these men, especially when you talk about like the baby girls or when you talk about the short kings. There's other ways to be a man that is still it's still manly. Like you're not
Mm,
like you're not less meant for that, you know what I mean? So I think the female gaze, instead of, how the male gaze kind of traps a bit what a woman can be, I feel the female gaze, I mean, maybe I'm being biased, but whatever. I think the female gaze actually expands what masculinity can be, which also tells a lot about how women, again, are like slightly more supportive and open-minded than men were up to this point, and it offers men to also be other sides of themselves without ever not being considered a man. Like they are men still. It's just like a different.
yeah, for sure. I feel like it definitely expands the definition of masculinity and what's considered attractive and whatnot. And I just wish men would do the same with women, you know? I feel like that's so behind.
I figured that with all this kind of shift in gaze and like a more feminine touch on everything, and I think like we look much more to men in a slightly more objectifying way than ever before. I think there's these two possible consequences that I see that are kind of happening already.
Yeah.
Uh, as reactions to this. So the first one is the opposite extreme. We have been also confronted with a lot of within the manosphere of the internet with these male podcasters and stuff.
Oh my God, the alpha
Our
males
Yeah, like there's like
have to be an
I feel like
alpha. Like, what's an alpha, you know?
yeah, and then they kind of invite, I don't know, only fan girls to like discuss and say that they're stupid. Anyway, it's like a whole thing. But I feel like in all of these situations, like there's always a big worry about their position in society. So
Mm.
and their virility and their
Yeah.
health status. So they always come up with problems of like, oh, there's a loss on testosterone in like recent generations. And then they blame women for everything. So they blame women for the fact that the men are like very lonely.
Yeah,
Um,
because women don't want to date them. Oh my God, it's like this Bumble campaign that was like shaming women for not wanting to have sex with men.
yeah, yeah, like the whole celibate thing, like, oh, don't
Yeah.
go celibate, just download Bumble.
Yeah, honestly. Oh, disgusting. Disgusting. Cringe.
Yeah, but it really feels like because women, okay, so because women grew and evolved in a certain way of like a constant defiance of their role in society, and men did not accompany that whatsoever, they feel misplaced. So instead of like questioning it themselves, they just blame on women for it, and
Yeah,
they really pray
because
and
why would
promote
they
the
try
back.
to evolve, you know?
Yeah, so they just keep on promoting this going back to this to the
Yeah, to what they
traditional.
know, to like what they're established in instead of like evolving themselves and kind of progressing and breaking down their own preconceived ideas and their own understanding of their world and their position in it. They just try to bring us back, but we're too far out, so it's already too late.
Yeah, exactly. So it is a very extreme reaction because in the pop discourse and the pop media discourse is so feminine and feminized now that you have, I think they feel threatened. And instead of confronting that within themselves, they just blame on others, aka us. So it can be very harmful because their bigger audience tends to be young boys of like 11, 12, and they have very like misogynistic rhetorics, and it could be very bad for young boys who are like still forming, themselves and their identities, growing to be fans of like these people who I don't think they have no clue the responsibility they hold in the public sphere, like
Yeah,
with the
for
public
sure.
platform. So that's one of the consequences that I think we've been like seeing, which all also linked to our right politics and yada yada. That is like happening and is definitely a consequence of this, which could be like it is bad, but I think it also reflects how much of an impact I think women are having more and more and how they're like making themselves way more present to cause this type of reactions.
Yeah.
And another side of this thing that I saw, which I think can be bad, is that the fact that we are objectifying men slightly more and creating all these archetypes, attributes, and stuff has to do, like, men can definitely develop like unhealthy beauty standards and
Yeah.
ideals, just like how women did.
Yeah, that's
So like one of them is, for example, muscularity. So you have male influencers portraying this physique of like highly muscles, which sometimes are like just utter muscles, like look heavier, look bigger.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it really changed the way, like it's not, they call it like self-improving movement, kind of like how we say a glow up. But it's focusing only on looks with the goal to be attractive to
Yeah,
women. And I think
exactly.
that's
It's
quite
like
important.
yeah, it's like those videos of men after a breakup going to the gym to suppress their emotions through working out. And then instead of actually progressing emotionally and learning what went wrong, how to be more in touch with their emotions, they only focus on their physical appearance, hoping that's gonna fix all of their problems and make them more appealing to women. And then kind of is a cycle because I feel like those men then later they become attractive, but they haven't evolved emotionally whatsoever. So then they just become those fuck boys and heartbreakers because they're emotionally immature or afraid to commit to someone again because they've been hurt in the past. But now they're attractive. So they see, oh, I attract all of these women, but I'm not able to commit to any of them. So I'm just gonna fuck around and find out, I guess.
Yeah, this focus on the physique and stuff. You would always connect to vanity and you'd always connect to women and women like physical attributes. But if you think about it, because we've been ruled so much for the male gaze, men are the ones who care way more about physique, actually. Because then that's why women developed so many unhealthy beauty standards because they had to keep up with these physique attributes that men are so obsessed about. So when we go see how we prefer personality over looks. That we kind of like establish that, right? But then also, why are men so obsessed on proving their beauty if we already proved with all these archetypes that's not the beauty that we are concerned about? Or like we are so willing to find an ugly man attractive. Why you keep focusing so much on looks? Because actually the looks mania has been mostly a male thing.
Yeah, for sure. it's kind of like men find themselves suffering from the standards they themselves imposed in a sense. And
Yeah.
if someone else starts imposing the same mechanisms or are behaving in a similar way, they feel lost because again, the balance of power is shifted, and suddenly they find themselves in the reverse position of the one being objectified, the one being dissected, the one being categorized into a trend, and the one being looked at. And they're just not used to that.
Yeah,
And
especially with the thing of being looked at. They're
exactly.
still not
And
familiar with that.
they're not familiar with it at all. Whereas like for women, it's kind of second nature. You're always looked at, you're always perceived, you always feel the gaze on you whenever you leave your house, or not even because it's also on social media, it's everywhere, but especially, whenever you leave your house, you are looked at. It's something you live with for your whole adolescence and then adult life. And it's just second nature. Whereas for men, it's just so unthought of. And it's very difficult for them to find themselves in that situation. And I think that's why they kind of often react in those like very extreme and defiant ways.
Yeah, and there was this trend that I wasn't aware of until it just appeared on my research, which is I would say perhaps the first beauty trend created by men and for men, which is called look maxing. And as the kind of name says, like maximizing your looks to be attractive to women. So it's about making your own appearance better. And it's mostly focused on your face and attributes like your jawline and stuff. So you have sometimes surgical operations, but other times it's just techniques on how to improve your features, like very scientifically.
Washa.
Yeah. So you have about like things like bone smashing and chin extensions to create that like wolf like kind of look.
What?
Again, the animals keep coming through. And yeah, it is like very unhealthy because men do start just kind of like us like pinpoint a lot of situations like your eyebrows, your eyes, like your chin, your cheeks, like
Yeah,
all
like
these like
nitpicking
things.
like little features, yeah.
Yeah. So, which just like how it happened to women so for so many years, it attacks on these little points of low self-esteem amongst men that, as we said in so many of our episodes, according to dating, on how men are just not filling up the standards for women and they need to look attractive. So we're starting to see the aftermaths of these beauty standards on men with trends of this kind starting to appear and be very damaging for them. You would hear of a lot of women doing plastic surgeries, and men now are starting to do the same. So, should we try and stop these things straight away as we see it, or are we women just gonna let it slide for men to have the same?
Insecurities as we
Like the same poison. Like I think it could be a very interesting point for feminism in a sense of are we actually going to stay up to our word, or we just let it go as almost like a mini revenge, because that also would be kind of bad for them, but don't they
That's
deserve?
true. That's true. No, that's very true. I feel like that's something that's going to be very interesting in 20 or something years to look
Mhm.
back on and see that shift, because I feel like that shift is kind of radically happening right now. So it's something it's going to be interesting to analyze from a time perspective in the future and see how it turns. But I mean, in my opinion, women are still the ones being, marginalized and whatnot.
I mean, yeah, of course, but like, I think all of these little trends that are happening and they're really initials of a shift. I remember like my mom telling me this back in 2011 or whatever. Like it was a long time ago. I was still young, and she's not the most versed in pop culture. But I remember so well when she told me that, like one time that she said, Raquel, I do sense things will change in a sense, a whole thing about women and in society and stuff. She's like, things are going very slow, but I do sense they are shifting. And she's like, she's very like about like sensations, you know what I mean? She's also like, I feel this, so it might be true. And but in fact is that perhaps we do sense these shifting. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have these extreme reactions from men, right? Which obviously is a consequence of it and we have to deal with it. But obviously things are actually shifting, otherwise we wouldn't have these reactions as well.
That's true. Well, on that note, let us know what's your type of man. Is it the rodent? Is it the golden retriever? Is it the chef man? Is it something else? Is there something we don't know about?
Yeah, is there an animal that we haven't heard of?
Yeah, exactly. What's on your sphere of the internet? Because as we know, the algorithm is very tailored, as we found out. And for
Yeah.
some reason, the chef man is really targeting my feed, but yours might be different. So let us
Yeah.
know.
Let
And
us know your zoo.
if by any chance you
Definitely.
are a guy listening to this podcast, which is probably very unlikely, also let us
Sure.
know what you think. We are open to hearing all opinions.
Yes. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you very soon.
Bye.
Bye.